I put down the empty glass on the kitchen counter. If I'd had the strength, or maybe the nerve, I would have hurled it across the room. Anything to shatter the silence. Instead, I just stared at it. The overhead light gleamed off its polished surface, like a mirror reflecting a life I no longer recognized. Next to the glass sat my wife's digital voice recorder, blinking with a tiny red light. I'd been listening to her private recordings for the last hour. Snooping, really. Maybe that makes me a bad husband, but I wasn't concerned with morality at this point. Not after I found out what was hidden in that dusty trunk in our closet. The trunk, ironically, had come from my side of the family. My grandfather's war chest, a relic from his service in Korea. It was supposed to hold old letters, family photos, the kind of keepsakes you dig out on holidays to remind yourself of who you are. I never guessed it would hold a single document that blew my identity to pieces. My son's birth certificate, the real one. The one with a name in the father's field that wasn't mine. I used to think ignorance was weakness, that a real man confronted the truth head-on. Now, I'm not so sure. Knowing has gutted me in ways I'm still trying to process. I keep replaying the scene in my head, lifting that piece of paper, reading the words, seeing the name. Michael Reynolds. A man I barely knew, and never wanted to know. A man who wormed his way into my home, my bed, my entire life. Through my wife, Sarah. A man who left a mark on me that I can't erase. I press play on the recorder. Her voice cracks through the kitchen like thunder in a church. Soft. Intimate. Breathless. She's talking to him. She's talking to me. She's describing nights I only dimly recall. Nights when I was asleep or on a business trip. Nights that existed behind a veil of illusions. My illusions. Michael, I keep thinking he'll wake up, she whispers. But he never does. He sleeps so deeply. A pause. A sigh. My stomach clenches. A scraping sound. Could be her adjusting the phone, or maybe crawling into bed. I don't know. Then I hear a low laugh. Not hers. It's him. His voice. There's a tenderness there that turns my insides to ice. How dare he whisper her name like that? I stab the stop button, panting as if I'd run a marathon. This is the first time in my life I've truly felt rage vibrate through me like electricity. My hands shake, either from fury or heartbreak. Maybe both. I try to gather myself. There's a loud hum of traffic outside. It's nearly 8 p.m., the time people return home for dinner, their cars rumbling down our suburban street. But in here, the quiet is deafening. I remember 2 nights ago, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. Sarah had been asleep, or so I thought. She was muttering a name under her breath, and I leaned closer, thinking maybe she was dreaming of me. Instead, I heard Michael. She sighed it like a prayer. Even then, I forced myself to believe I'd misheard, or that it was some fleeting nonsense. Now I know better. The betrayal had started long before that. Maybe it was even ongoing. Something in me was numb, in denial, refusing to piece it together. But after finding that birth certificate, the last puzzle piece slotted perfectly into place. Our son, my boy, wasn't mine. I recall the day I confronted Sarah. Though confronted might be too strong a word for how it began. It was more like a slow realization that I couldn't keep my mouth shut. We were in the living room. She was sipping tea, scrolling on her phone as if nothing in the world was wrong. I took a seat across from her, my elbows digging into my thighs, leaning forward like a man about to deliver a death sentence or confess to a crime. "Sarah," I said, my voice low. "We need to talk." She looked up, the faintest flicker of concern darting across her face. Her eyes, those green eyes, searched mine. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I held up the folded birth certificate. I'd been carrying it in my pocket like a loaded gun. "I found this," I said. She went pale. Her hand quivered slightly, nearly dropping her teacup. But she forced a smile, the kind of smile that tries to say, "This isn't happening." "David, where did you?" "In the old trunk." My own voice trembled at first. Then something inside me hardened, a coil of steel tightening in my gut. Under the stack of papers from my parents. I guess you thought I'd never dig that deep. She said nothing. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. I read it. I continued. I saw the name. Michael Reynolds. So I have just one question for you, and I want the truth. Am I not his father? Her lip quivered. She glanced down at the floor, then back up at me, eyes shining with tears. He's yours in every way that matters, she croaked. David, please, you have to understand. Understand what? I snapped. My voice sounded almost unrecognizable, an angry snarl. That you cheated on me before he was even born. That you lied for 13 years. Lower your voice, she hissed, suddenly. He could hear you. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, so now you care about what our son hears. It escalated from there, words flung like knives. She tried to claim it was just a one-night mistake, then admitted it was more than that. Finally, she turned desperate, stepping toward me, her hands extended as if to embrace me, to calm me down. But I jerked back, repulsed by her touch in that moment. By the time it was over, we'd retreated to separate rooms, emotionally battered. She never denied Michael's role, never insisted that the birth certificate was some bizarre mix-up. It was all so pathetically real. The truth, at last. I barely slept that night, imagining scenes of them together. Sarah's lips on his, Sarah's soft moans that I'd heard on the voice recorder. Images that refused to leave my mind, fueling a rising tide of anger unlike anything I'd known. That anger burned hot, but it also moved quickly into a cold, methodical numbness. I became a man with a plan, a mission. If I had to watch my life collapse, I'd at least do it on my own terms. I'm not a violent person by nature, but heartbreak can twist even the gentlest soul into something capable of destruction. Our boy, Jacob, is everything to me. Even now, after the revelation. The thought of leaving him or condemning him for something he had no part in was unthinkable. The kid was innocent. All these years, he knew me only as Dad, and I was determined not to let him down. But it was complicated. My rage at Sarah was like a living thing, a snake coiling around my heart. Every time she tried to talk, to make amends, to cry and beg, I'd see that image of her in bed with Michael, or hear her voice on that recorder, whispering his name. I'd push her away, shut her down, or walk out of the room. Then there was Michael, the father of my son. I'd never had much interaction with him. He was just someone from Sarah's social circle, a face that popped up once or twice at gatherings. A marketing consultant, he'd told me once, flashing a cool smile. Tall, confident, always seemed to have the right words. I hated him now. Hated him with a searing intensity. I needed proof of their ongoing affair, because somewhere in my gut, I sensed it wasn't just a relic of the past. Sarah's slip of the tongue at night, whispering his name, suggested something current, alive. That voice recorder was only a fraction of it. I started piecing together their patterns, phone bills, odd receipts, late-night text messages that lit up her phone. She'd always been careful, but she'd gotten comfortable, complacent. My revenge plan took shape slowly. First, I had to see them together. I needed that final push, the cold, hard image that would drive me to do what had to be done. So I started paying attention, memorizing her schedule. She had showings and appointments for real estate. She said she was meeting clients at their properties, but sometimes the addresses didn't match up. And sometimes it was Michael's address she'd scribble in her planner under the guise of a potential buyer. The day I followed her was scorching hot. Mid-July. The sun pounded down on the asphalt. I tailed her car from a distance, my adrenaline roaring so loudly I almost missed the turn onto a quiet street in the older part of town. She parked by a neat little bungalow. I watched her from half a block away, windows down, sweat beading on my forehead. She got out of the car, checked her makeup in the side mirror, then walked up to the door and rang the bell. Michael appeared in a crisp white shirt and slacks, his hair styled just so. They didn't greet each other like two strangers, or even two acquaintances. He pressed his lips to hers almost instantly. A soft kiss, but filled with a tension that made my stomach churn. She leaned into him, her hand on his chest, and then they disappeared inside. I wanted to step on the gas, drive out of there, pretend I'd never seen it. But part of me was drawn forward. A sick fascination, or maybe just the masochistic need to confirm my suspicions once and for all. I left my car and approached the house from the side, moving like a thief, slipping around to peer through a half-drawn curtain. My heart hammered as I caught sight of them in the living room, her arms around his neck, his hands resting on her waist. The kiss deepened, a slow exploration, the kind of kiss that once belonged to me. She pulled off his shirt, her hands roaming over his chest. I saw her smile, heard a gentle laugh, then watched as they moved to the couch in a heated urgency. There was an erotic charge in the air that I couldn't deny, no matter how much it wounded me to observe it. Their bodies pressed together, the soft rustle of clothes, low murmurs, sighs that cut through me like shards of glass. The primal part of me wanted to break down the door and rip him away from her, to punish them both. But I was rooted to the spot, a twisted voyeur to my own nightmare. My nails bit into my palms. My vision blurred. I could barely process the wave of betrayal, the stark reality that this wasn't just an old fling. It was alive, continuing, thriving behind my back. The noise of the street behind me felt jarringly normal, cars whooshing by, someone's dog barking in the distance, a lawn mower droning somewhere. And here I was, face pressed to a stranger's window, watching my wife make love to a man who wasn't me. I forced myself to pull away. If I stood there any longer, I'd do something I'd regret. This was enough. This was more than enough. Driving home, I expected tears or a breakdown. Instead, a calm settled over me, a cold, focused calm. Everything was so painfully clear. She hadn't just betrayed me once. She was still betraying me. And I, like a fool, had been in the dark all along. My son, Jacob, was the result of her long-standing relationship with this man. Maybe not physically long-standing, but emotionally deep enough that she'd risked her entire marriage for it. That night, I didn't sleep in our bedroom. I holed up in the den, door locked, phone in hand, planning. Sarah tried to talk through the door. She tried texting me, but I ignored her. I scrolled through the old messages I'd secretly forwarded to myself from her phone. Little chat logs between her and Michael, peppered with sweet nothings, inside jokes, secret confessions. Every word was a knife, but it also fueled the fire of my plan. I'm not proud of what I did next. Some men might have chosen therapy, or tried to salvage what was left. But the moment I saw them together in that house, I knew I wanted retribution. I wanted Sarah to feel the pain I felt, the humiliation, the fear of losing everything. And Michael, smug, self-assured Michael, needed to be taught a lesson about meddling with another man's wife. I found my chance within a week. Sarah was out visiting her sister, which I now suspected was code for meeting Michael again. Jacob was at a friend's house for the night. The stage was set. I rummaged through Sarah's phone logs, found Michael's business address, and marched right into his downtown office building as though I had an appointment. The security guard barely glanced at me. 10 minutes later, I was stepping off the elevator on the 8th floor, my heart beating like a war drum. The office was sleek. Glass walls, modern furniture, hush-hush conversations taking place in pods. A receptionist tried to intercept me, but I told her my name and said I was a friend of Michael's. She told me to wait, but I moved past her, scanning for that smug face. He was in a conference room with a client, all polished and gracious. When I walked in, heads turned. I could see confusion in Michael's eyes. He recognized me, but probably didn't expect me to just show up in the middle of the day. "David," he said, slowly, trying to keep his composure. "Is everything okay?" "Not even close," I replied, voice shaking. People around us stiffened, sensing the tension. The client looked on, half in curiosity, half in alarm. Michael started to move around the table, caution in his posture. "Let's talk outside," he suggested, flicking a glance at the client. I stepped closer, ignoring the nervous chatter from the watchers. "We will talk, Michael. But not in some corner like a dirty secret. We'll do it right here, right now." "Sir," the client ventured. "Maybe." "Stay out of this," I snapped. Then I grabbed a folder from my jacket. Photos. Printed images I'd taken from that day outside his house. Snapshots of him and Sarah in flagrant. They weren't pornographic, but they showed enough for any adult to understand. I slammed them on the conference table. "You want to explain these, Michael?" My voice cracked on his name. "You want to explain how the father of my son is a man who can't keep his hands off a married woman?" Faces went pale. The client stood, sputtering something about calling security. Michael's eyes widened with shock and anger. "David, let's be civil. This is not the time or place." "It's exactly the time," I growled. "You did this, not me. And now everyone can see who you really are." He snatched the photos off the table, flipping through them with trembling hands. He shot me a glare of pure hatred, then turned to the confused client. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I need a minute." The wave of satisfaction I felt in that moment was ugly and powerful. The man who had stolen my marriage, my trust, my entire identity, was squirming under public scrutiny. I left before security arrived, but not without one final threat whispered into his ear as we stood in that conference room. "Stay away from my wife. Stay away from my family. If I see you near them again, I swear it'll end worse than this." I walked out. My pulse was skyrocketing, adrenaline surging. I felt like I'd just unleashed a storm, and in a way I had. The revenge wasn't complete, but it was a start. Sarah found out almost immediately. Michael called her in a panic, no doubt. She came home that evening in tears, demanding to know what I'd done. We argued in the living room again, voices rising above the hum of the air conditioner, while the overhead fan clicked tirelessly, as though it too was exhausted by our relentless conflict. "How could you humiliate him like that?" she cried, eyes red. I folded my arms. "Why do you care, Sarah? He's just a fling, right? Or is he more than that?" Her lips trembled. She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but it stuck in her throat. "You destroyed our marriage," I continued, my voice raw. "You lied to me for more than a decade about our son's paternity. You kept sneaking around, and you're upset because I exposed your lover in front of his colleagues. Do you realize how twisted that sounds?" She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "David, please, we can fix this. We can still be a family." I was confused. Confused. "You had 13 years to come clean. 13 years, Sarah. You want me to believe this was confusion. You never intended to tell me, did you?" Tears poured down her cheeks. "I was afraid," she whispered. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. Losing what we had." I laughed bitterly. What we had was a fantasy, apparently. How can I lose something that never existed? She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Finally, she sank onto the couch, head in her hands, sobbing. A dull ache in my chest told me that part of me still cared. Part of me still remembered her as the woman I married, but that part was overshadowed by rage and betrayal. I left her there, alone with her tears. The next few days were an emotional war zone. Sarah tried to make amends. She insisted that Michael meant nothing, that they were over, that she'd do anything to regain my trust. She pleaded with me to see a counselor, to talk to a pastor, to do something other than tear everything down. But I was on a path of no return. I avoided her as much as possible, focusing on work, burying myself in tasks just to keep from going insane. I barely ate, barely slept. My mind was a spinning top of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. One evening, I heard Jacob come in from school. He'd stayed after for baseball practice. I listened from the other room as Sarah tried to act normal, but she was awful at hiding her devastation. He asked if everything was okay. She gave him half answers. He's not a little kid. He can sense the tension. I realized I couldn't just keep ignoring him. He deserved some explanation, and that terrified me. How do I tell my boy, my stepson, apparently, that his father is someone else? When I finally mustered the courage to talk to him, I pulled him aside into my study. He looked up at me with those eyes, brown and gold, not so different from mine. Another cruel twist. "Dad," he said, a slight tremor in his voice. "Mom's been crying a lot. And you look like you hate her. What's happening?" It was one of the hardest moments of my life. I couldn't reveal the full truth, not like that. So I held him gently by the shoulders and spoke in a low voice. "Your mother and I are going through some problems, grown-up problems, but they have nothing to do with you, okay?" He studied me, tears threatening to form. "Are you guys splitting up?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But Jacob, I want you to understand something. I'm always here for you, no matter what. I love you." He nodded, silent tears sliding down his cheeks. Then he hugged me, holding on for a long time. I felt the weight of my promise pressing down. Despite everything, I'd fight for him until my last breath. It wasn't enough just to humiliate Michael at his office. My anger still simmered, demanding a final confrontation, a final retribution. I wanted him to feel the loss he'd inflicted on me. I wanted to see him break. The chance came a week later, when Sarah suddenly announced she was going to end it once and for all. She claimed she needed to see him face to face. I didn't trust her, so I followed again, this time with a plan. She drove to his condo, about 15 minutes from our place. I parked a block away, walked the rest on foot, staying hidden as best I could. The condo building had a side alley that led to a back entrance. I slipped in behind another tenant, thankful no one asked questions. My pulse hammered in my ears. I got to Michael's floor and listened at the door. I could hear them arguing, muffled voices, too faint to catch every word, but intense enough to sense the conflict. Then fury overcame caution. I turned the knob. It was unlocked. I pushed inside. Sarah stood in the living area, her back to me. Michael faced her, arms crossed, face twisted in anger. The room was modern, minimalist, the walls lined with abstract art that felt cold and impersonal. They both froze when I entered. Sarah spun around, shock and fear on her face. "David, what are you? How did you?" Michael advanced a step, fists clenched. "Get out," he snarled, struggling to keep his voice down. "You have no right to barge in here." I let out a short laugh. "No right. I have every right. You're sleeping with my wife, fathering my son. My entire life has been upended because of you." Sarah tried to intervene, stepping between us. "Michael, please." "David, listen. I'm ending this. I swear I'm." "You swear what?" I snapped, glaring at her. "That this time it's really over." "How many times did you say that before? How many times did you crawl back to him, behind my back?" She lifted her hands in desperation. "This is different. I told him we have to stop. I told him it's tearing our family apart." Michael let out a bitter scoff. "You think it's that easy? After all these years, you just walk away?" My fists tightened. The tension in that condo was suffocating. I could barely see straight through the red haze of anger. All I saw was him, the man who had taken everything from me. "You?" I growled, stepping forward. "You need to get it through your head. She's my wife. Our marriage is broken, but she's still the mother of the boy you helped bring into this world. You want more destruction. You want to see how far I'll go." Michael didn't back down. "You want to threaten me again, David? Go ahead. Because I'm sick of your intimidation. Sarah's the one who came to me all those years ago, telling me you were distant, telling me you were always working. She needed someone. I was there. My vision blurred with fury. You dare blame me for your affair?" He shrugged, a cold glint in his eyes. "I'm just stating facts." I lunged without thinking. Sarah screamed. My hand gripped the collar of his shirt. I felt the rage pulsing in my veins, an ugly, powerful force that demanded release. For a split second, I considered striking him, unleashing every ounce of hatred I possessed. But I saw Sarah out of the corner of my eye, tears streaming, face contorted in panic. So I loosened my grip slightly, though I kept my hold. "I could kill you," I hissed, "but you're not worth the jail time." He tried to push me off. I resisted. Sarah cried out, "Stop. Both of you, please." A moment of silence. The three of us breathing heavily, hearts pounding in a standoff. Then I shoved him back. He stumbled, caught himself on the edge of a table, knuckles white. I turned to Sarah, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "You told him you're ending it. Good. You want to salvage any shred of our marriage. Prove it." I glared at Michael. "Because if I ever see you touching her again, so help me." He cut me off. Yeah, I get it." I stared him down, half convinced he'd lunge. But he just stood there, chest heaving, eyes full of malice. Sarah was in tears, trembling. The hatred in the room was thick enough to choke on. I turned my back to them and walked out. Once in the hallway, I realized I was shaking. My fists ached from how tightly I'd curled them. That final confrontation should have felt like closure, yet I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Only emptiness. The days that followed blurred together. Sarah hovered like a guilty shadow, unsure how to approach me, terrified of pushing me away. I avoided her, diving into anything that would keep me occupied. Work, house repairs, coaching Jacob's baseball practice. I could sense Sarah's desperation in the quiet gestures she made, folding my laundry, cooking my favorite meals, looking at me with regret shining in her eyes. Part of me was still too raw to accept even the slightest apology. But the strangest thing happened. In my solitude, I realized the rage was beginning to subside. Maybe it was fatigue, or maybe I was just reaching a point where the anger no longer served a purpose. I'd confronted Michael. I humiliated him. I'd forced Sarah to acknowledge the extent of her betrayal. Jacob was stuck in the middle, and that knowledge made me rethink the shape of my revenge. Yes, I wanted them to suffer, but I also wanted to protect my boy from the worst of it. I started to see that I couldn't hold on to this fury forever. It would destroy me. And him. One night, I was in the garage, polishing the side mirror of my old truck, when Jacob wandered in. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, hesitant, like he was about to do something risky. He cleared his throat. "Dad?" I looked up. "Hey, buddy." He took a step closer. "Are you and Mom okay?" I sighed, setting down the cloth. "We're working through some tough stuff. But none of it is your fault, understand?" He nodded, biting his lip. "I heard you two fighting a few nights ago, about someone named Michael." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. He pressed on. Is he the reason you're so mad?" I swallowed hard. "Part of it. But it's complicated. Jacob, your mom and I, we've got a lot to figure out." He watched me carefully, and for a moment, I glimpsed something heartbreakingly mature in his eyes. "I want to help," he said quietly. "I want us to be a family again." The ache in my chest grew. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Me too," I said. "Me too." After he went back inside, I stood there, alone with my thoughts. The truck's polished mirror caught my reflection, haggard, worn, eyes hollow with sleepless nights. Was I really going to spend the rest of my life nursing this resentment, punishing Sarah, punishing Michael, punishing myself? The final blow came the following week, when I decided to meet a lawyer about divorce proceedings. I had the folder of evidence, photos, texts, voice recordings, that damning birth certificate. If it came to a fight, I wanted the upper hand. The lawyer, a seasoned professional with a calm demeanor, listened patiently. Then he gave me a sober assessment. Because the child was born during the marriage, I might still be on the hook for child support, even if I wasn't the biological father. The fact that I'd raised Jacob as my own for 13 years carried significant weight in the eyes of the law. "It's not just about punishing your wife," he said. "It's about deciding what's best for you and your son, both emotionally and financially." That stung. For all my righteous anger, I couldn't deny that financially punishing Sarah would also hurt Jacob, and deep inside, I still felt a bond with him that no piece of paper could sever. I left the lawyer's office feeling more conflicted than ever. That night, Sarah tried once again to talk. She found me in the living room, flipping channels aimlessly, not really watching anything. When she sat next to me, I tensed, but I didn't move away. "David," she began softly, "I'm sorry. I know words don't mean much right now, but you have to believe I never wanted to hurt you. I was young, stupid, and lonely. I never meant for this to go on so long." I stared at the muted TV, watching flickers of color. "It went on because you chose it," I said, my tone empty. She nodded, tears glistening. "You're right. I'm not going to make excuses. I was selfish, and I betrayed you. But please, just give me a chance to show you I can be better." A cold chuckle escaped me. "Better? After 13 years of lies?" "Yes," she whispered, voice shaking. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, church counseling, giving you space. Anything. I don't want to lose our family." I felt my eyes burning, tears threatening. I hated how vulnerable I felt. "I can't just forgive," I murmured. "Not like that. And I might never be able to trust you again." She inched closer, placing a tentative hand on my arm. I didn't brush it off this time. "I understand," she said, "but I'll wait. As long as it takes." We stayed like that for a while, the TV lighting our silhouettes in blues and yellows. Neither of us spoke again. But a tiny sliver of possibility, of a different ending, began to spark in my mind. The next morning, as I was getting dressed for work, I noticed Sarah had already left. She often had early appointments for real estate showings, but something felt off. I went about my routine anyway, noticing the quiet hush of an empty house. Jacob had gone to school early for practice. Strange, how the absence of noise could feel both relieving and unsettling. I found a note on the kitchen table, her handwriting scrawled in a shaky line. "David, I know it might not fix anything, but I need to do something on my own. Please trust me. I'll be back tonight." Immediately, suspicion flared. Was she seeing Michael again? But some part of me wanted to believe she was sincere. Against my better judgment, I let it go and headed to work. Throughout the day, my anxiety spiked, returning with every quiet moment at my desk. I tried to focus on spreadsheets, phone calls, management tasks, but Sarah's note lingered in my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. Finally, that evening, I heard her car pull into the driveway. I was sitting in the living room, the voice recorder still on the coffee table like an unwanted ghost. I'd listened to it so many times, tormenting myself with the evidence of her betrayal. She walked in, a cautious expression on her face. "I went to see Michael," she blurted. A jolt of anger shot through me. "What?" "Before you explode," she said quickly, raising a placating hand, "let me explain. I went to settle the last of it, tie up the loose ends." She set down a folder on the table. "That's the contract for his condo. He's selling it and moving back to California." I blinked, not sure I'd heard right. "He's leaving." She nodded. "He realized there's nothing left for him here. Our affair, whatever it was, is over. I made that clear. He's staying with a friend until the sale finalizes. Then he's gone." I exhaled, a strange mix of relief and disbelief. "He's just giving up. He said he's tired of the drama. And he doesn't want to keep hurting anyone. Plus, his job can be done remotely from anywhere, and he has family back west." She paused, looking at me with those green eyes that once lit up my world. I know it won't fix what I've done, David. But at least he won't be around to rub salt in the wound. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I thought about how different everything was now from just a month ago. My illusions were gone, my trust shattered, but so was the immediate threat to the life I'd built. Michael was leaving. That piece of the puzzle was no longer in play. Still, I couldn't ignore the deeper fractures. The betrayal. The deception about Jacob's paternity. So many nights of lies. Could I truly forgive that? She stepped closer, her voice gentle. I'm not expecting miracles. I just wanted to show you I meant what I said. I'm ending this. Completely. Her words sunk in. I felt the glimmer of anger still there, overshadowed by a weariness that weighed on me like a lid blanket. You did the right thing, I managed, my tone grudging. She nodded, tears forming again. I want us to heal, David. Somehow. I looked away, gaze settling on the voice recorder. How many times had I used it to torture myself with her whispers and moans for him? Slowly, I picked it up. My thumb hovered over the play button. Then I turned, walked to the sink, and held it under the faucet. Sarah gasped as I let the water gush over it, short-circuiting the device. The red light flickered, then died. I tossed it into the trash. That's my first step, I said quietly, turning to face her. We can't move forward if I keep replaying the past. But don't expect me to be okay overnight. She inhaled shakily, nodding. I won't. Over the next week, a fragile peace settled over the house. Sarah slept on the couch or the guest room most nights, giving me space. We spoke more civilly about everyday matters. Groceries, bills, Jacob's school events. But the tension was still there, lurking under the surface. Meanwhile, Michael Reynolds was apparently packing up his life, vanishing from ours. One evening, I took Jacob to the park. We threw a baseball back and forth, the late summer sun slanting across the grass. His laughter was like a balm on my wounded heart. Here was a boy I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, consoled after scraped knees and heartbreaks. How could he not be my son? Biology be damned. He paused between throws, squinting at me. Dad, you seem calmer. Things at home any better? I caught the ball and exhaled. Maybe. A little. You're not leaving, are you? He asked, voice trembling with worry. I walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, kiddo. No matter what happens, I'm here for you. We're in this together. He nodded, blinking rapidly to hide tears. Thanks, Dad. Hearing that word, Dad, it gave me a jolt of emotion. I ruffled his hair. Simon, let's see that curveball you've been practicing. We threw a few more pitches, the tension in my chest easing with each toss. As we packed up to go home, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't had in weeks. My son was my anchor. I had a lot of choices to make, and I wasn't sure if they included Sarah or not. But I knew one thing. I would not abandon Jacob to chase revenge indefinitely. The day Michael left town, Sarah told me quietly at breakfast. She'd received a final text. I'm gone. I hope you find happiness. She showed it to me, her hand trembling slightly, as if she expected me to lash out. But I just set my coffee mug down, nodded, and left for work. In the car, I felt an odd relief. The man was gone, truly gone. It wouldn't erase the betrayal, but it severed one source of daily anguish. That night, after Jacob went to bed, I found Sarah sitting in the living room, flipping aimlessly through a magazine. I joined her, sinking into the armchair. We sat in silence for a while, the air heavy with things unsaid. David, she ventured finally, I know we haven't decided anything, but I want you to know, I told Michael never to contact me again. I blocked him everywhere. I mean it. I studied her face, tired, haunted, yet determined. I believe you, I said. For once. She nodded, swallowing. Thank you. Another silence. Then she began to speak in a wavering voice. There are so many things I regret, so many choices I wish I could undo. I should have ended it years ago. I should have told you the truth about Jacob, but I was terrified. You're a good man, David. You deserve better. I snorted softly. Maybe I wasn't as good as you think. Maybe if I'd been more attentive. She shook her head vehemently. Don't blame yourself for my mistakes. I made my own choices. Her admission was raw, honest. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes that wasn't clouded by panic or defensiveness. It struck a chord in me. The desire for revenge had burned right, but it had also burned me out. Looking at her, I realized I was exhausted. Holding on to all that hatred was like carrying a red-hot coal in my palm. It only hurt me more the longer I clung to it. I sighed, letting some of that anger dissolve. I'm not saying I forgive you, I warned. But I'm not sure I want to destroy everything either. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'll take any chance you give me. I nodded, feeling an odd mixture of relief and sorrow. I want to be sure Jacob doesn't lose the only dad he's ever known. That's priority one for me. Me too, she whispered, voice trembling with gratitude. Me too. The weeks that followed were slow, cautious steps toward rebuilding, or maybe constructing something new. We went to a therapist, which was awkward and painful, dredging up all the ugly truths, the anger, the betrayal. But it was also liberating. For the first time, Sarah laid out her reasons, her insecurities, her guilt. I confronted my own failings, the nights I'd come home late from work, the emotional distance I'd inadvertently created. It didn't excuse her actions, but it gave them context. We still slept separately, but we talked more. Really talked. Jacob noticed the shift. He'd find us in the kitchen actually speaking calmly instead of snapping at each other or avoiding eye contact. That gave him hope, and me as well. One day, I caught myself smiling at something Sarah said about a neighbor's ridiculous yard ornament. The normalcy of that moment almost brought me to tears. I realized I missed smiling with her, sharing trivial thoughts. There was still a deep well of hurt inside me, but it wasn't bottomless. The final piece of closure came when Jacob, after much deliberation, asked about his birth. He knew something was off, and Sarah and I decided we had to be honest. We sat him down in the living room, explaining that while I wasn't his biological father, I was every bit his dad in the ways that mattered. He listened, eyes shining with tears, but he didn't lash out or reject us. He turned to me. So, does it change anything between us? My throat felt thick. Not a thing, I said, pulling him into a hug. I'm still your dad, no matter what. He cried then, soft sobs against my shoulder, and I realized that this moment, painful as it was, could be the start of a healthier future, one not built on lies. Sarah was in tears too, but she placed a hand on my back in gratitude. For the first time, I felt something like acceptance. In the end, I didn't divorce Sarah. Maybe I should have, maybe some part of me still wanted to. But I realized I wasn't doing it out of fear or cowardice. I chose to stay, to see if we could rebuild something different, something grounded in honesty. We're still a work in progress. Our marriage is nowhere near perfect. Some days the memories resurface, and the pain flares up like an old injury. But I've learned that healing is a process, one that requires a willingness to face the darkness in both of us. Michael Reynolds became a ghost from the past. Last I heard, he was settling in Northern California. I never got an apology from him, nor did I expect one. My revenge, confronting him publicly, humiliating him, forcing him out, was enough of a statement to satisfy the anger I'd once carried like a brand. Now, late at night, sometimes I lie awake listening to Sarah breathe beside me, pondering how a man can tear down his life and still find a way forward. In those quiet moments, I feel a mix of bitterness and gratitude. Bitterness for the betrayal, gratitude for the clarity it eventually brought. Yes, it broke me. But it also forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. My own emotional distance, the hollow rituals of our marriage. the illusions we both clung to. I won't say we got a happy ending, because life isn't a fairy tale. The scars run deep, but we found a way to face each new day without the suffocating weight of secrecy. And in a strange twist of fate, I discovered a stronger version of myself in the rubble. A man who knows that unconditional love isn't always about blood, and that real forgiveness is the hardest gift you can give. But it's also the one that can set you free. Sometimes, late at night, I think of that empty glass. I picture it on the counter, shining under the kitchen light. I remember the rage, the heartbreak, the confusion. And I recall how I wanted to smash it just to hear it break. But I didn't. I let it sit there, a silent witness to the end of one life and the start of another. And maybe in the simplest sense, that's what all this was. The end of illusions and the uncertain, complicated beginning of something real.